So when I was asked to make this introduction, I was a bit stymied as to what I was actually going to say. Because how does one find the right words to express the genuine respect and admiration in which he is held by those who know him and who have worked closely with him, whether it has been over a period of many years or only recently? How does one introduce the visionary with a gift of foresight to read prevailing conditions and almost to predict them, which has led to the growth of a business group that not only has made its presence known in South Africa, but that has spread its not so insignificant influence to the four corners of the globe? How does one introduce a man with a big heart, a family man, someone who has the utmost esteem and love for his mother, and who is happy to publicly acknowledge and display this affection? This is the true mark of a man who is kind and considerate of others. And how do I possibly introduce to you this man who is also a leader, not afraid to roll up his sleeves to uplift someone from the most destitute of circumstances by finding them employment, who listens to his colleagues and their troubles, and who can remember the names of each of his staff members, who makes time to walk the dogs, and who can make a mean crab curry for his family and friends, but at the same time who can also sit down to tea with presidents of countries and royalty, as well as captains of industry, to discuss matters of world importance? How does one introduce someone whose philanthropic mindset is authentic, not just for show or because it's the fashion of the moment to be seen to be giving, but who in this case is someone who has grown from nowhere and with nothing, with the scars of forced removal, into a warm-hearted, prosperous individual who still sees the best in humanity and trusts in the good in all people? Some of us have been known to say that he trusts too easily. But it is precisely because of this quality, for him to believe in the best, that keeps us fighting beside him in the face of all odds. His ability to inspire, motivate, and uplift is legendary, although always against a backdrop of high expectations, which propels people to excel, and here I mean people from all walks of life. But, respected guests, it is perhaps his unwavering belief in the empowerment of others through creating opportunities for those who would not otherwise have had the doors open to them, and by being a trailblazer in an industry where few were welcome, and at a time in our country's history where everything was still raw and settling into a new dawn of democracy, that makes him stand out as a man of worth and a man I'm honored to call my boss, my colleague, my friend, that I now ask to share a few words of wisdom with us all. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome on stage Dr. Iqbal Survé.
Honored guests, friends, family members, members of the board of directors, business partners. I've seen quite a few here. I'll come through all of them later on. Lutfia has walked the journey with us. I was going to call her Auntie Lutfia, but I shall not. Thank you for those wonderful words, Lutfia. I don't think you were talking about me. I must confess, I think it's someone else. But it's so wonderful to be here and to celebrate the 70th year of Premier Fishing. But I want to acknowledge, you're right. You know, I'm doing a photo book of my life. And it will come out in February next year, only for friends and family. And doing that photo book was looking at this journey. And in this week, my mom was at my home and I started asking her probing questions, because all of which were based on the photographs. And I was amazed at what an amazing and strong woman she is. And I think we benefit from the women around us that shape us and shape who we are. And I've been very lucky to have just wonderful women around me I'm the middle of 3 children. My eldest sister, Aziza, who's here and who's the chairperson of Premier Fishing. She's the real businesswoman, not me. I'm not a businessman. She's the real businesswoman. And then my younger sister, Fatima, the doctor, was much more cleverer than me. And I think it was a shock to my parents that I got into medicine, because I think she was the one that came with all the top grades. I didn't see her here, but I know her kids are studying as well at the moment. That's probably why, with exams. And then, of course, my beautiful wife, Tricia, who's here. I'm very lucky to have as well. Incredibly smart, fluent in Mandarin, that made both of us a lot of money by investing in ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, the company that owns TikTok, because of her Mandarin. And lots of other beautiful women in my life. But I also want to say to you that there was another young woman who came to me when she was 18 or 19, and who I just really saw her talent. And she went on to become the CEO of Premier Fishing. And that's Rushan Isaacs. And she's here this evening. And I know she stepped down a couple of months ago for health reasons, but I saw Rushan grow up in Premier Fishing and with immense talent. And I'm so proud that she's the first woman CEO of a mid-sized, large fishing company in South Africa. And I think one of the few in the world, to be frank. And she did a brilliant job. And she handed over the baton to her successor, Suren Ramdi, who, as you heard earlier, is so eloquent, and his wife Mohini is here, another strong woman, whom I've known both of them for a long time. So we are very blessed to have these amazing people in our organization. But you've heard a lot of people say very nice things, and I think it's just in this room about me. But I also want to tell you that we build and climb and see from the shoulders of others. And someone that's been with me in this journey from the very beginning, right from the beginning, right from the day I left medicine, is Advocate Wallace Mgoki. And I'd like him to come up here, because he has been my friend, colleague, mentor, brother, and he's someone who's got, I don't know if you know, 3 international honorary doctorates. And he's one of the first persons in Cape Town that actually has a place named behind him during apartheid called Wallace Dean. And he served the people of Cape Town through the Legal Resource Center. And Wallace, I must thank you, because our journey is a journey that we have traveled together. And there are many others, but you have been there from day one. Wallace was part of the founding board of what was then Second Jalo. And an amazing man, and an amazing family man, and we're just talking about some of the things that he did. And we would not be here today, frankly speaking, if it wasn't for people like Wallace and many, many others. And some of them will get awards, or some of them will get them posthumously later today. Thank you so much, Wallace. Thank you. But of course, I always say that companies are people, made up of people. It is people that make Premier Fishing. It's 1,000 plus employees that have been there through thick and thin. And the thing that I'm most proud of today is the fact that Premier has partnered communities, it has given employment to the very poor, it has provided dignity, and it has done all of those things while being a successful business. And that it continues to do that. And I'm also very proud, as far as I can remember, that it is one of the few fishing companies that has not lost a single boat at sea or lost someone at sea. And I'm proud of that safety. They did not sacrifice safety for profits. And I think that's so important. There was something else I'm proud about, Premier Fishing, is that they've always acted with the utmost integrity. And when Tim Riddell is here, Malcolm Stanley is here, all of whom have run their companies with fantastic integrity. But there was a time in the fishing industry where there were those that were greedy and wanted to overfish and, make super profits at the expense of our fish in the sea. And the people sitting here today are here for a reason. There's karma, because none of us, did that. And in fact, we were active against those who overfished. And we rewrote the rule book so that South Africa became one of the examples, an exemplary country in terms of stopping overfishing so that our resources could recover for future generations. And I'm proud of that because it was so easy to overfish. It's so easy to make super profits. I'm also proud of the fact that we've invested almost 300 million in sustainability in fishing, in aquaculture, in the marine growers enterprise, and continue to invest probably another 100 million or so. So the stories of Premier Fishing is the stories of ordinary fishermen, fisherfolk, the stories of skippers, fishermen who go on, and for more than 2 decades, they've tried to get me on one of these trawlers and take me out to sea. But I'm afraid I get seasick. My beautiful wife swam recently from Robben Island to Blouberg, which was 2.5 hours, or 7.5 kilometers in the most crazy. And all I had to do was be support on this tiny boat, and halfway through I got seasick. So I just don't have, the stomach for the boats. But I admire tremendously. Those are my heroes. My heroes are the ordinary folk of the world. My heroes are the people that go every day on those boats in the most difficult, atrocious conditions and, feed their families. And the thing that we can do for them is look after them and to make sure that they are safe and never sacrifice safety for profits, and to make sure they have dignity, that when they go home, they can feed their families. Those are our true heroes, the true people that have built up the organization like Premier Fishing. There are many directors of Premier Fishing here, directors of AEI, directors of other companies, CEOs and CFOs. And of course, I acknowledge all of you. Salim Young is here, an old friend who's been there right from the very beginning, rescued me through many difficult times with his wonderful wife as well. So our journey that we can celebrate today is your journey. All of you sitting here today. And you must take the credit for this wonderful achievement to be there for 70 years. But it would not be me if I don't tell you a story. So let me tell you how I bought Premier Fishing. So I left medicine after practicing for 10 years as a doctor and then specialist in 1997, October 1997 to be precise. And at that time, it was a new government. Mandela was still president. Jakes Gerwel was the chairman of the Second Jala Foundation. He was the Director General in Mandela's office. And all the fishing companies, the big fishing companies, I think only Tim Riddell possibly and Malcolm might remember this, but all the big fishing companies, they were big ones, the Oceanas of the world, the Sea Harvest, the INJs, the big ones, the Premier Fishing Company, they were the big ones at the time. All of them said, hold on, there's a new black government in place, so we better sell maybe 5, maybe 10%, maybe 20% to black entrepreneurs so that we can get our fishing quotas. There's nothing wrong with that. It was part of our journey of empowerment and as the country moves on. And so some companies went and bought in Oceana, some companies went and bought in ING, and all of them got like 5%, 10%, etc. And here I was as a doctor leading, well, not earning a cent for 18 months, having left medicine, and being from the Western Cape, with the late Johnny Issel, whose son Fidel Issel is here, decided to travel to go see the Premier Group that was based in Johannesburg. Now, the Premier Group, if you know anything about South African business, was one of the biggest groups in the country. And I mean big group, like an Anglo-American size. They own Premier Foods, they own this, they own that. I mean, they own everything. So 3 of us went in, it was Kevin Patel, myself, and Johnny Issel. We went in to see Doug Band, who was the chairman, I think, of the Premier Group overall. Now, this is I came from poverty. My mother said to me the other day, when I grew up, there were 14 people in our 2-bedroom home, and she named everyone. That's how I grew up. So can you imagine going into this massive building, and it was classic, old style, colonial style, you know, everything, etc. And we came into this boardroom, and there were all these guys. They were very smartly dressed. For some reason, they all looked very tall. Don't know why. I remembered like it was yesterday. And then Mr. Ban, who was very polite, and I have the utmost respect for him. Mr. Ban said, Doug Ban said, so you guys also want to buy a share in Premier Fishing. And he said, you like the 16th group that we've seen in the last 2 weeks. Do you have any money? And Johnny Issel, if you know, had no money, and Kevin Patel certainly had no money, and I certainly had no money. So I said, well, we don't have any money, but perhaps we can find the money. He says, oh, well, you know, why should we sell to you? There's lots of other groups. And I said, because it makes sense to sell to us. He said, why? He said, well, you know, we can help you to really take your corporate business into the community, because we were political activists and we came from the community. We understand the community. That is where we come from. And he looked at me and he said, so how's that going to help us? And I said, well, maybe the community can help us to get quotas and keep your quotas. I said, okay. Long story short, we went back there 2 weeks later. And we met Doug Ban and the CFO. And he said, look, we've decided we're going to sell 15% to 3 groups. And you'll have 5%. The other black group will have 5%. And we're mixing them up, you know, from different parts of the coastal regions. And I said, Mr. Ban, why would you want to do that? You're just creating problems. Don't you like us? He laughed. He said, you know, you're a cheeky bugger. I said, no, I'm a doctor, you know. He said, then Mr. Ban said something about, I watched him very carefully. I could see that he was uncomfortable. And I said, you're very uncomfortable, Mr. Ban. What's wrong? And naturally, as a doctor, he started telling me about cramps in, I'll never forget, his left leg. I said, okay, you know why you're getting cramps? Because you're not standing up enough and you're not drinking enough water. So in between your meetings, I suggest you walk for 2 minutes or so every time, and you drink just water, no alcohol, just water. And lo and behold, a week later, we were back. And Doug Ban said, that was the best advice I've ever been given. And all my cramps have disappeared. And I've been to so many doctors, and none of them told me that. I said, you see, because they never saw you in action. And Mr. Ban, you've never seen me in action either. So give us the whole 15%. Then, as what happened next is We got the 15%. And it was going to be funded, vendor finance, by the Premier Group, because we couldn't. And that time, they'd valued Premier Fishing at that time at 115 million rand. Now for me, that's a lot of money. I drove a Beetle, right? And if you had a passenger in it, they fell through the floor because there was a hole in it on that side. I was the only doctor that drove a Beetle, right? For 10 years, 12 years I think it was. So I had no concept of millions and all of these things. You can just imagine, put yourself in my place. I certainly didn't know how to read a balance sheet or income statement, anything like that. I was so super impressed by this building, the people. Anyway, they were going to fund it, no problem at all. We were getting 15%, and they were valuing the business, and Bob's your uncle, we were the BE partner. And then I went back with Kevin, and now the team was slightly different. There were 2 other people that joined, and I said, you know what, if they can sell us 15% and pay for it, why don't we go and ask them to sell us 30% and pay for it? So off I went back a month later and met Mr. Ban. And we actually this time had lunch together in the Premier. That's when I saw they have these big lunches in these corporate offices. It was a fantastic lunch. And I always said to him, but you know, you have all of these things, but I don't see any fish on your table. You know, it was meat and this and that. And I ate the salad that day because I wanted to speak while he was talking, while he was eating. I said, look, Mr. Ban, why don't you sell us 30%? And he says, but we're selling you 15%. Now remember, at that point in time, 15% was the highest any fishing company had ever sold to any black shareholders of all the fishing companies in 1998. This was 6 months after I left medicine, 6 to 7 months. Then he said, but I don't understand your reasoning. I said, at 30%, we are more motivated, and at 15% to really help you be more profitable. So your 70% is going to be more valuable than your 85%. And Mr. Ban looked at me, and he said, how do you work that out? I said, look, this is what we will do. By then I'd studied, I'd spoken to the skippers, I'd gone to Premier, I'd seen these guys, and I said, how do you make more money in this business? And they told me this, and I went back, and Doug Ban was the head of the Premier Group, not Premier Fishing, to be very clear. So this is a massive multi-billion group. And I told him things that his guys never told him. Lo and behold, a week later, we got a letter. There was I don't think it was emails at the time. Got a letter to say, you have been successful for 30%. Now we're at 30%, funded by Premier Group. But I'm a restless character. So then, I went back to see Mr. Ban. And I said to Mr. Ban, I've studied the Premier Group. A business of this size, Premier Fishing, for 115 million is nothing, Mr. Ban, in your life. But it is everything in my life and the life of, the fellow investors. Mr. Ban, sell me the whole business. He looked at me and he says, you're a really cheeky bugger. Here we go and we give you 30%. And we fund the 30%. And you're going to make over time lots of money. You come back here and you ask to buy the entire business. And you don't have any money. And the equivalent of that 100 million today is like R1 billion, just to give you a sense if you were to buy the same business today. That's what you're basically. So he then says to me, hold on. He then calls in, I remember, 6 guys. For some reason, there were only men working at the Premier Group. I didn't see any women except at the reception. There were only men in the corporate suite. He calls them all in. He says, tell them what you just told me. So I stand there and I say, I just told Mr. Ban we'd like to buy the whole business. And they laugh. They laugh. They really laughed. And Mr. Ban said, Doug Ban said, this guy wants to buy the whole business, but he has no money. We are selling him 30%, and we're paying for it in a vendor finance deal. And I said, Mr. Ban, you said it correctly. I don't have any money. What happens if I go and find the money? He looked at me and says, no, that's sensible in business. I said, okay, give me 6 months, sell me 30% now, you pay for it, and give me 6 months to find the money to buy the whole business. And then Mr. Ban said, and I thought he was showboating with his colleagues, because he was the chairman. He said, no, you're a Chikibara. And we became good friends, by the way, just to be very clear, and I have the utmost respect for him. He says, you can buy the whole business. I give you 1 month to go find the money. If you don't find the money, we don't fund you for the 30%, we go back to funding all the other groups for the 15%. I came back to Cape Town, I reported that back to Wallace and all the other people, and they were furious with me. Absolutely furious with me. I cannot describe to you the anger that my colleagues had at me. I think if they could kill me, they would have killed me. There was no question about it. Here we were a group, we could barely raise 250,000 Rand amongst all our friends and activists and everyone. That's the maximum we raised. Now we were given an opportunity to own 30% of a business paid for by the Premier Group. And this bloody doctor goes and messes this up. And they said to me, why didn't you go back to medicine? You know, I mean, you don't know anything about business. Then I decided, hold on, I'm going to go to the IDC. And Christo Wiese was the chairman of the IDC. And the IDC was at that time the institution that backed Afrikaner Capital. They were not yet transformed. And then I went there, and Christo Wiese, I went to see him, and I said, look, your role is development, etc. We are development. Can you lend us the money? 115 million, which today is like $1 billion. It's like walking in. And then he said, no, I can't. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to allow you to come and present to the board of the IDC. And it was my first serious business presentation to anybody. And I trust me, I knew nothing about business, numbers, balance sheets, income statements. In fact, I don't even know how we got there, but eventually I learned, but at that time I didn't learn. I learned my lesson when we went from 250,000 to 500 million and then lost 160 million in 18 months, right? So I learned my lesson very quickly, and I went to Harvard, and I went to did my MBA and did all of that. And I learned you're never ever going to trick me again. Okay, and some of you will remember we own 14% of LeisureNet, which is today Virgin Active, along with Investec, First Rand, Southern Life, Sanlam, etc. But for us, it was a lot of money to lose when that thing went under. And Richard Branson bought it from me. But coming back to Premier, a month later, actually to be precise, 27 days later, I had a letter of commitment after presenting to the full board of the IDC. I said to them, you have one opportunity to effect real economic transformation and to do to black people what you did to Afrikaners. And I quoted to them a Afrikaans poet, even though I didn't like Afrikaans, C.J. Strydom. And there were more Afrikaner men in that room than there were black men. And they gave me 115 million. They lent it to me at 28% interest. Many years later, I recounted the story when I received the first black person to receive the Afrikaanse Handelsinstituut Sakeleier van die Jaar in 2007. With the Burger, my competitor today, putting me on the front page of my speech about when I said to Afrikaners, as you have empowered, you need to empower others, and that's how we build our country together. And the Burger published that speech, and the report published that speech, although today, Naspers Media 24 doesn't like me, but anyway, because I'm a competitor. That's how it is. But that was the story of how we were the first black group to own a fishing company outright, majority, whilst every other black group continued to own minorities, only until recently, when a few years ago, one of the other black groupings bought Sea Harvest outright. But I think there's important lessons in that story of Premier Fishing. The lesson is that, I wanted to own a business that we could genuinely transform. We could genuinely do, in our own way of thinking, our influence about sustainability, about people. Of course, the IDC got the shock of their lives when the late Johnny Issel, who was one of the top political activists in the country, as we announced this acquisition in Saldanha Bay, stood on the podium as I'm standing now and said, when workers shall be owners, all of you now own Premier Fishing. But he meant that literally. And the IDC called me up and said, what's this? You still owe us 115 million. You haven't even started, and you're handing over the business to the workers already. We then created the Workers' Trust, which gave them about 20-odd%. And every worker, over their lifetime, received a substantial amount of money as a result of that. And so Premier Fishing is very close to my heart. It means more to me. I mean, I don't think it's a secret that I'm a shareholder of Tesla, as Elon Musk said at the wedding, right? And yes, Tesla is where my wealth sits and other technology stuff overseas. But at the end of the day, what's closest to my heart is Premier Fishing. That was my baby. Right at the beginning, it was my first, along with Prosper, with René van Rooyen, Prosper Packaging, the first real transaction which I did. So, whilst I'm not with you physically, in the factories, on the quayside, on the boats, I'm always with you spiritually. I'm always watch what you do, because to me, it represents the ethos of who Sekunjala is. It represents my own journey and the hopes and aspirations of thousands and tens of thousands of people and communities that Premier Fishing has impacted on over the last 2 decades. With that, I want to say thank you for honoring me with the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you for your amazing dedication and commitment to this company and to our group. Thank you for being there with us through the most incredible challenges that we've had to face simply because I'm outspoken and I own a media house. Never ever, I told Ilan on Twitter, it was quite funny, I said, when I bought a media house, my fortune dived. Now you've bought a media house, my fortune has dived. He laughed, with Twitter when he bought Twitter. But actually, I've benefited immensely from Premier Fishing in seeing the goodness and what is possible. As Mandela said, dream the impossible. What's impossible can be done. I think all of you are testimony to that. I want to thank all our partners, our business partners, everybody, the directors, the people, the skippers. Please convey to them my sincerest thanks, my heartfelt thanks from me and my family, from my family and I, let me use the correct English, my family and I, for your contribution, to our country, the economy, and keep up the great work, keep up sustainability, do the right thing always, do good and do well, and our country will thrive. Let's work together to build a new South Africa, one where we tap into the hearts and the minds and the talent of all our people, because it is that kind of non-racialism, it is that kind of thing which has made Premier Fishing successful. And thank you once again to all of you. Thank you.